Have you ever smiled so convincingly that even you forgot how much pain you were in? It's a haunting feeling, walking through life with a mask so familiar, so praised, that you begin to confuse it with who you really are. You may be the one who always shows up, always says yes, always listens. You may be the strong one in the family, the peacekeeper in relationships, the one who absorbs everyone else's storms. And yet, behind the kind words and practiced patience, there is a growing ache you cannot explain, a quiet inner scream that no one seems to hear, because no one sees the part of you you've locked away just to survive. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world. In many ways, it serves us well. It helps us function, protect our vulnerabilities, and find a sense of belonging. But when the persona becomes the only face we show, when we confuse it with our identity, it becomes our prison. We no longer connect with others from the soul, but from the script. We no longer feel joy in being seen because we are never truly seen. The mask is applauded, but the heart behind it remains untouched. It starts subtly. You suppress your sadness so you don't burden anyone. You say yes to favors while your body screams for rest. You play the agreeable partner even when you feel unseen, unheard, and unloved. You laugh at jokes that hurt. You nod during conversations that bore or frustrate you. Slowly, inch by inch, you retreat from yourself. Not because you are weak, but because the world taught you that being too much, too real, too honest might cost you love, safety, or acceptance. And then one day, you look in the mirror and do not recognize the person staring back. Jung believed that this disconnection from the true self is one of the deepest roots of human suffering, because while the persona may gain approval, it silences the soul. And the soul does not go quietly. It manifests through anxiety, restlessness, apathy, and a strange sense that something is missing. People often mistake this feeling for depression, failure, or boredom, but what if it's actually the cry of your authentic self, begging to return? So many midlife crises are not crises of age, but crises of authenticity. The mask has been worn too long. The career you once celebrated feels hollow. The relationship that once felt safe now feels suffocating. The identity you spent years building no longer fits. And the tragedy is not that you are broken. It's that you have forgotten who you were before you began performing. Jung warned us that the longer we deny our shadow, the repressed, inconvenient truths within us, the more it leaks through the cracks. Unlived emotions become outbursts. Repressed needs show up as resentment. The love you withhold from yourself turns into the hunger for external validation. You start asking questions like, why do I feel invisible in a room full of people? Why do I dread silence? Why does love feel so exhausting? What if the answer isn't to try harder or be better, but to take off the mask? What if healing begins not by fixing what's broken, but by shedding what was never truly you? Can you remember who you were before you became the responsible one, the likable one, the perfect one? And more importantly, are you willing to meet that part of you again? Let this be a turning point, not a breakdown, but a breakthrough. Because the moment you stop performing and start revealing, you don't lose yourself. You finally return to yourself. The soul does not need applause. It only asks to be lived. Have you ever hated something in someone so much, only to later realize it was something you secretly feared about yourself? There's a strange discomfort in this kind of recognition, a sharp sting in the gut when the very traits you criticize in others echo something buried within your own soul. Maybe it's the woman who always speaks her mind and you find her arrogant. Maybe it's the man who chases success unapologetically and you call him greedy. Or maybe it's the friend who stopped tolerating mistreatment and you call her selfish. But what if your reactions are not about them at all? What if they are mirrors reflecting what you've been taught to exile inside yourself? This is the painful brilliance of Jung's idea of the shadow. It's not just a psychological concept, it's a mirror we spend our lives avoiding. Jung believed the shadow is composed of everything we repress, reject, or deny in ourselves because it threatens our identity, our belonging, or our carefully constructed image. Society rewards certain behaviors and punishes others, and so we learn to cut pieces off of ourselves in order to fit the mold. But in doing so, we also cut off access to our full aliveness. The price of social acceptance is often inner fragmentation. We don't just lose touch with the parts we label bad. We lose the fire, the boldness, the sensuality, the creativity, the truth that comes with them. Take, for instance, the trait of anger. Many people, especially those raised in environments that rewarded obedience and punished emotional expression, learn to suppress their anger entirely. Anger is labeled as dangerous, inappropriate, and even unspiritual. And yet, anger has a purpose. It signals when boundaries have been crossed. It contains information about what matters to you. In its pure form, anger is a force that says, "I deserve better." But when repressed, it doesn't disappear. It turns inward and becomes depression. It leaks out in passive aggression. It turns into chronic fatigue, numbing, or even autoimmune disease. So, here's the paradox. The anger you reject might actually hold the key to your voice, your self-respect, your life force. Or consider sensuality. So many people, especially women, are taught to be modest, restrained, and pleasing. To be soft, not bold. To silence their appetite for attention, touch, or joy in their own body. Sensual expression becomes equated with shame. But what happens to the soul when it is told that its natural joy is dangerous? What happens to the body when pleasure becomes taboo? The result is a kind of quiet death, a disconnection not only from desire, but from vitality itself. Jung would say that within that very shame lies the seed of radiance, that reclaiming sensuality is not immoral, but sacred. It's the beginning of wholeness. The truth is, we are haunted not by the things we lack, but by the parts of ourselves we've abandoned. The people we envy often represent the versions of ourselves we were not allowed to become. The rage we feel toward others can be the cry of a wounded inner self asking to be seen. Our strongest reactions are not always righteous judgments. They are sometimes projections, the shadow begging for reintegration. Jung didn't say this to shame us. He said it to free us. Because once you realize that what you reject in others reflects what you have disowned in yourself, you gain power. You can stop being a prisoner of unconscious reactions. You can ask, "What part of me is this touching?" And suddenly, life becomes your teacher. Every judgment becomes a doorway. Every trigger becomes a chance to retrieve what was lost. So, what if the traits you've spent your whole life trying to avoid are actually the ones that make you powerful? What if your strength lies not in perfection, but in embracing the contradictions inside you? What if the pieces you were told made you unlovable are actually what make you real, compelling, unforgettable? This is not easy work. It takes courage to face the parts of you that were once punished, mocked, or misunderstood. But this is the first climax in your transformation. The moment you realize that what you've been fighting might actually be what you need, not because the shadow is always right, but because it is always honest. And in its rawness lies your return to truth, to creativity, to love. So the next time you feel that sharp judgment rise up, pause. Ask yourself, not what is wrong with them, but what have I forgotten in me? This is how healing begins, not by chasing the light, but by turning toward the dark with open eyes and an open heart. Have you ever wondered why certain patterns keep repeating in your life, no matter how much you try to change? Why do you attract the same kind of relationships, find yourself in the same emotional storms, or sabotage your own success just when things start to go well? It can feel like life is caught in a strange loop, as if something beneath the surface is steering the wheel while you struggle to stay afloat. Carl Jung would call this the work of the unconscious shadow, quietly scripting your life behind the scenes until you dare to face it. Many people live as if the past is behind them, but in truth, it lives inside them. A man who was never truly seen by his father may spend his entire adulthood trying to prove his worth to emotionally unavailable people. A woman who grew up being told to be nice at all costs may constantly attract partners who take advantage of her silence. The past doesn't just linger in memory. It hides in your habits, your reactions, your compulsions, and unless brought into awareness, it becomes fate. Jung explained that the shadow is not evil in itself, but it becomes dangerous when it remains unconscious. What you refuse to look at doesn't disappear. It builds pressure like a ball held underwater until it explodes in ways you cannot control. One moment of uncontrollable rage, a spiraling depression with no visible cause, the panic attacks that come out of nowhere, the jealousy that poisons your relationships, the passive aggression that undermines your words. These are not just symptoms, they are messages. The shadow is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to be seen. Projection is one of its most deceptive tools. You think someone else is the problem. They're selfish, manipulative, cold, dramatic, but often you are simply witnessing a trait you've disowned in yourself. This does not mean the other person is innocent, but it does mean your reaction holds a mirror. What are they touching inside you? What emotion are they waking up that you've tried to bury? Projection is the shadow's way of getting your attention through the outside world because you've refused to listen on the inside. Recurring dreams are another portal. Have you ever had a dream that felt too vivid to ignore? Maybe you're being chased by a dark figure. Maybe you're standing in front of a door you're afraid to open. Maybe your voice disappears when you try to speak. Jung believed that dreams are the language of the unconscious. The symbols they contain are not random. They are fragments of your shadow, trying to communicate through metaphor what your conscious mind has avoided. Night after night, your psyche tries to deliver messages wrapped in strange symbols. Are you listening? And then there's emotional outbursts, the moments when something small triggers something massive. A delayed text sends you into panic. A friend's opinion feels like a personal attack. You cry uncontrollably after holding it together all week. These are eruptions of suppressed truth. The shadow does not stay quiet forever. If you don't face it willingly, it will show up through breakdowns, burnout, and relational chaos. This is the second climax of transformation. The moment you realize your life is not fully yours until you make the unconscious conscious, that the part of you you've pushed away is actually orchestrating your decisions, your reactions, and your fate. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But this is not a curse, it is an invitation. Because what happens when you finally turn around and look the shadow in the eye? When you stop blaming the world and start asking, what in me needs to be healed? You reclaim your power. You begin to understand yourself not as a victim of your patterns, but as their author. You open the door to self-responsibility, to integration, to freedom. So, the next time you feel emotionally hijacked, or you catch yourself reacting in a way that feels irrational, ask yourself this: what am I really afraid of? What am I really protecting? What truth have I buried so deep that it now leaks out through chaos? The healing begins not when you suppress these moments, but when you get curious about them. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is your map. And if you learn to read it, it will not only stop controlling your life, it will lead you back to the parts of yourself that are most alive, most powerful, and most real. Why is it so terrifying to look inward when life begins to unravel? Why do we tighten our grip on control, silence our pain, or distract ourselves with busyness when something inside us is crying out for truth? Most people fear that if they truly stop and face themselves, they will collapse. But Carl Jung believed the opposite. He taught that the act of turning inward, of consciously meeting the parts of ourselves we've denied, is not a breakdown, but a breakthrough. It is the first sacred doorway to transformation. Think of the moments when you felt emotionally paralyzed. Maybe your partner left, and instead of grief, you felt numb. Maybe you got the job, the house, the life you thought you wanted, but an inexplicable emptiness settled in. Or maybe it was the late-night panic, the rage you didn't know you were capable of, or the chronic exhaustion that no rest ever seemed to fix. These aren't random misfortunes. They are signals, signs that something in you is demanding to be heard, and healing doesn't begin when the pain stops. It begins the moment you stop running from it. Jung understood that avoidance is not the absence of conflict, it is the soil where it grows. Every time you bury an emotion, suppress a need, or deny an impulse, it doesn't disappear. It gathers strength in the dark, and then it reemerges disguised as anxiety, depression, reactivity, or even illness. The psyche will do anything to be seen. Your shadow does not need to be conquered, it needs to be invited into the light. So what does that first step look like? It is not dramatic or glamorous. It is quiet, raw, and deeply personal. It begins when you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What am I not allowing myself to feel?" This shift in question marks the beginning of inner dialogue. You turn inward not with judgment but with curiosity. One of the most powerful tools Jung recommended was journaling, not to record your day, but to meet your inner world. Write as if no one will ever read it. Let the buried parts of you speak. Rage, fear, confusion, desire, give them a voice. Often you'll be shocked by what emerges, but that is the point. You are making the unconscious conscious. Dreams are another portal. Keep a dream journal by your bed. Don't just analyze the symbols intellectually. Ask yourself, what emotion did this dream carry? What is my soul trying to express through metaphor? Jung believed that the dream world reveals what our waking mind resists. The figure chasing you might not be a monster. It could be the part of you that's been neglected for too long. And then there are emotional triggers. Those moments when someone says or does something that lights a fire inside you. Most people try to suppress or justify the reaction. But healing begins when you pause and ask, what wound just got touched? What memory does this feeling carry? Your trigger is not weakness. It is a flashlight pointing to where you've stored pain. Some even find it helpful to write letters to their shadow, not to fix it, but to listen. Write, "What do you want me to know?" Then let the response flow, even if it feels strange or uncomfortable. This exercise isn't about logic, it's about intimacy. You are building a relationship with the parts of yourself you've pushed away. This is the first brave step, not healing the shadow, but facing it, not controlling the darkness, but sitting with it long enough to understand its shape. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That means your growth begins not by avoiding discomfort, but by walking straight into it, with open eyes, a steady breath, and a willingness to learn from what you've spent your whole life avoiding. So ask yourself, with full honesty, what part of you have you exiled? What truth are you afraid to speak, even to yourself? And if you listened to that part, not with fear, but with compassion, what would it say? Because maybe the real fear is not what we'll find in the dark. Maybe the real fear is realizing we've had the key to our freedom all along and didn't know we were allowed to use it. What if the very emotions you've spent a lifetime trying to silence are the ones holding the key to your deepest love and wildest creativity? What if your anger wasn't shameful, but a compass? What if your envy pointed to your forgotten dreams? And what if your longing wasn't weakness, but proof you're still alive, still capable of beauty? Too often, we are taught that light is lovable, but darkness must be hidden. We smile when we want to scream. We say we're fine when we feel hollow. We chase inspiration by bypassing our wounds, trying to paint over pain instead of alchemizing it. But Carl Jung reminds us, the gold is in the shadow. What you repress doesn't disappear, it waits, not to haunt you, but to be used, to be transformed. Have you ever wondered why some of the greatest artists, healers, and visionaries speak from a place of sorrow? Because they stopped running from it. They didn't just feel pain, they shaped it. They molded the anguish into poetry, sculpted the grief into music, and turned rage into revolution. And in doing so, they touched something eternal because it came from somewhere real. This isn't just for the gifted. You do not need a stage or canvas to be creative. You only need to be honest. Think about a time you finally allowed yourself to say what you truly felt in a relationship. Maybe it was terrifying. Maybe your voice shook. But afterward, wasn't there relief? Didn't something shift, even if it was uncomfortable at first? That moment wasn't a weakness. It was art. It was love made real. When you begin integrating your shadow, conflict becomes a teacher instead of a curse. In romantic relationships, this shift is profound. Instead of projecting your pain onto your partner, you begin to own it. Instead of demanding they rescue you, you ask, "What is my soul trying to resolve here?" That question alone can save years of miscommunication and silent suffering. It brings humility, curiosity, and compassion to the table. And this inner clarity spills outward. People who have made peace with their shadow carry a strange magnetism. They are grounded, unpredictable, and deeply human. They don't perform perfectly. They embody truth. And that truth draws others in, not through charm, but through presence. Creativity also deepens. Have you ever tried to write, paint, lead, or build something while avoiding your feelings? It feels forced, fragmented. But when you embrace the parts of you that ache, your work comes alive. Your words gain gravity. Your voice holds weight. Jung believed that the shadow contains a reservoir of energy, and once reclaimed, that energy can fuel your entire life with purpose and fire. So ask yourself, what if you stopped trying to be good and started being real? What if you stopped polishing the surface and began feeding the roots? What music would your pain write if it had a pen? What masterpiece could your heartbreak become? Because maybe the goal is not to rise above your darkness, but to walk with it, to let it dance with your light, to let it stain your hands with truth. Because that is where beauty begins, in the place where the shadow is no longer feared, but invited into the heart and turned into something holy. Have you ever asked yourself why you feel strangely empty even when everything looks fine from the outside? Why, despite success, stability, or routine, A quiet ache hums beneath your days. That feeling is not a failure. It's not a flaw in your life's design. It's a whisper from the parts of you that were silenced, the self that was never allowed to speak, the truth that was buried to survive. Many people spend decades pursuing goals that were never truly theirs. We choose careers that please others. We follow timelines we never questioned. We become providers, achievers, caretakers. But in the process, we often abandon the parts of ourselves that once burned with wonder. The child who wanted to paint, the teenager who longed to travel, the adult who quietly dreamed of healing others. As Carl Jung said, nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. So what happens to the parts of you that go unlived? They don't vanish. They slip into the shadow, and when ignored, they create quiet tension, resentment, and fatigue. But when embraced, they become purpose. They become calling. Jung believed that your life's meaning doesn't come from external striving, but from integrating what was lost. When you reclaim what you once rejected, life stops being about performance and starts being about alignment. Think about someone who turned their deepest pain into service. The woman who grew up silenced, who now coaches others to use their voice. The man who battled addiction, who now helps others find sobriety. The mother who lost her child, who now brings comfort to grieving parents. These people did not find their calling by escaping their wounds. They found it by turning toward them. They realized that the very thing that broke them was trying to lead them home. You might not have a dramatic story, but you have a story, and buried inside it is gold. Have you ever felt a sudden, inexplicable pull toward something? A subject, a cause, a craft? That's not random. That's your shadow trying to speak. Sometimes your frustration at the world reflects what you're here to mend. Your longing is a map. Your heartbreak is a doorway. The self you suppressed for safety is the same self that holds your mission. Start small. Revisit an old interest. Notice what energizes you. Ask, what did I love before I was told who to be? Then listen and act. You don't have to quit your job or change your life overnight. But when you let the parts of you that were silenced come alive again, everything changes. You speak differently. You walk with intention. You attract people and opportunities that match your inner truth. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires the integration of all parts of the psyche, not just the polished ones. Your purpose, therefore, isn't something you find, it's something you remember. It was always there, waiting beneath the roles and rules and routines. So ask yourself, what part of me have I been hiding that is actually the key? What story have I been ashamed of that might become someone else's survival guide? What dream have I called impractical that may be the very thing I was born to bring forth? The moment you stop suppressing who you really are is the moment your true path begins. That is the sacred irony of the shadow. It hides not only your wounds, but your wings. And when you dare to uncover it, you don't just heal, you awaken. You don't just live, you lead. What if the healing of the world begins not with politics, or systems, or revolutions, but with you sitting in silence, facing what you once feared within yourself? What if the greatest act of service is not fixing others, but integrating the darkness you were taught to deny? In Jung's vision, the final stage of transformation is not just personal, it is collective. It is the return of the individual, not as a mask or a fragment, but as a whole soul. And when enough of us walk that path inward, something shifts in the field of humanity itself. We are living in a world overwhelmed by division. People shout louder, blame faster, react from pain rather than respond from depth. Wars rage not just on battlefields, but in living rooms, online feeds, and even within our own minds. Why? Because what we refuse to own within, we project outward. The shadow we deny in ourselves becomes the enemy we fight in others. Jung warned that humanity's refusal to face its unconscious leads to mass psychosis, to cruelty disguised as righteousness, to progress that costs us our soul. But what happens when we turn toward the shadow instead of away? Something sacred. The monster becomes a teacher. The pain becomes a portal. The judgment softens into understanding. The energy once trapped in shame becomes a force for creativity, empathy, and wisdom. You no longer need to win every argument or control every outcome. You see yourself in others and others in yourself. Conflict transforms into dialogue. Separation gives way to compassion. This is not idealism. This is a deep psychological truth. When you do the inner work, when you stop blaming, hiding, numbing, and instead ask, what part of me needs to be seen, held, understood? You create ripples far beyond your personal life. Your children feel it. Your relationships deepen. Your art becomes more honest. Your presence calms rooms. You carry a light that is not performative, but earned, not borrowed, but born from descent into the dark. So many people live in fear of their own depth. But your darkness is not a curse. It is the birthplace of your power. And when you integrate it, you become medicine, not by trying to save others, but by being someone who no longer runs from themselves. This is the final truth of shadow work. It is not just about fixing your life. It is about helping the world heal from unconscious pain by becoming a conscious human being, one who sees clearly, feels deeply, and acts with heart. That is what Jung called individuation. That is what the soul longs for, and that is what the world needs now more than ever. Are you willing to meet yourself completely, not just the light, but the forgotten fire buried in your bones? Because once you do, you don't just become whole, you become a lighthouse. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.